Hi, I'm Rob. I make it better. That's what I do. So this is a little bit shot out of order, and the reason is that when you have an energy recovery illness, you can't really do everything at once. So today I'm going to go through the checklist a little bit and the baseline, right, and how they are connected and linked. So when you start working with your kid as a parent, the first thing you do is to ask them, show them this, right? You don't speak the words; they want to spell it first, because you don't want auditory information to, you know, that much from the beginning. Yeah, show them the word. You know what this is, and they go like, yeah, spell it out loud, and they spell it, and you listen for them to spell it, and you ask them the question, was that correct or not? And they will say, well. Now, when you listen to them when they're spelling out, it may sound like C, a bit of a space between the letters AT, and if they do that, then they will do that with other words. It will take them a lot more time because they have to retrieve the word that they have stored. Everything you do is a memory skill if you didn't know that. So once you have confirmed that they can spell cat, backward and forward, they can verify that it's correct or such, now you have established a baseline. Cool. What are you going to do with that? Well, now you're on the checklist. And the checklist means that you have to verify where the words and letters are in the words and how they look. Because people think, you see things, but that's not really, it's a mislabeling, it's a misrepresentation, if you like. Your brain construct things, right, that we then perceive as we're seeing things in the environment and such. So a dyslexic can look at the word on a paper or a board and recognize the word. And when they then try to spell it, now they have to retrieve it from their own memory. And if that process is not working as it's supposed to, with encoding, verification, and retrieval, they become stuck. But it's not usually doesn't happen with every word, because there are some words they may recognize and can read and or even write correctly. But as soon as they go into that, what else, they're reading something and it just stuck, right? So once you establish a cat, you have a baseline. That's important because you always want to go back to something they can do, right? If you start a new word too early, they get frustrated, or they can't do it, and then you have to take a break and ask them to spell cat again. It's, back and forth like that, because you want them to have success. Now, so how do you fix that? All this verification, encoding, and retrieval. Well, you're on the checklist. The word is a constructed thing. Your brain has a lot of brain centers to that works to coordinate things and construct things. So when I asked the kids, when I was working with them, I asked them the first question is like, okay, where is the word? And I wanted to point. And it sounds kind of silly, right? What do you mean, where is the word? Well, a dyslexic may not have the word in front of them, like, I will look at it, okay, my word is here. Okay, oh, it's actually there. All right. It's a contraction, right? So, because some of them may have it behind them. I was working with a kid, she was like 12, 14, something like that at the time. I looked at the mother, does she have a diagnosis of some kind? And she, oh yeah, we have a dyslexic diagnosis. Show me the papers, 6 pages. And I looked at the pages and I looked at the girl, I said, this doesn't help me. And I threw the paper away. And she was like, what? And I said, spell cat. And she spelled cat, and I said, where is the word? It was behind her. And I said, why don't you take that word behind you and move it forward? That's what you do with the checklist. You check where the word is located. If it's not where it's supposed to be, you tell your kid, put it where it's supposed to be. And if you want to help them, just put the word of the paper right there. Oh, there it was supposed to be for me. All right? Now, when you start asking them questions like this, ask them in optional case, are the letters big or small? And if they don't know, you ask them to show with their hands. You'd be surprised sometimes what they can tell you. They can tell, well, they're 2 meters in another room. I had a kid like that, 2 meter, and then in another room. I said, doesn't that make it difficult to read? And he was like, yeah, I'm a dyslexic, asshole. I love kids, by the way. They just, tell you stuff like that all the time. And I said, well, let's fix that. So they adjusted things, right? Then you can ask them other questions like, is the color of the letters black, white, or some other color? I was working in a classroom, and I went by a girl, and I checked her, and she said, well, white letters on the white background. And I looked at her, how do you tell the difference? White and white is kind of, there's no contrast there. And then she said so lovely, oh, they fall towards me, the letters. That's a horrible way to read and spell things. Can you make the letters black? And she said, yes. He said, okay, does it make it easier now? And she was like, oh, yeah. Now, there was the summer holidays and such. I came back for a follow-up in the classroom. I checked with her, and then she made the letters red. But it was working for her, right? Remember that your brain, or your kid's brain in this case, construct things from different centers in the brain, right? So different things can be effective for a dyslexic. It doesn't really matter because you just, run the checklist and check, and if there is something is off, you just, if the color of the letters are white and the white background, you make the letters or the background in a different color, so they have easier time to see the word. And when you ask them, for example, are the letters or the word, clear or fuzzy? It's basically pretty much like adjusting a camera. If you're gonna, people who shoot videos of cameras, sorry, this is part of, having energy recovery in this. Sometimes, your body doesn't, get along with you. Is that when you're a professional, you can, order manually change focus of the camera and all that stuff, and, add, different for low environment of light and such in the nighttime and so on. But most people, when they shoot a camera or a video, just use autofocus like I do, right? And when you're working with your kid, you have to remember this is pretty much dialing in for them how to see the word, or in this, technically, it's constructing the word the way you're supposed to. Black letters, and the letters are, it's not, when they spell the word, that's a big clue, by the way. If they spell the word C, there is space, AT, this is not how the word should look. And you go, do you really spell, why did you spell it C to make the paw break, and then you go AT after a while? And your kid doesn't know why they do it. And I say, why don't you put the C closer to the AT, so you put it, up there like that, and you also, doesn't that make it easier to spell it, and then you can also just spell it again, and they usually go CAT. It goes faster now. They just didn't know that's what they were doing with the word in their heads. Okay. You check the colors, you check if it's clear or fuzzy, and you ask a question like that, are the letters big or small? It makes it easy for kids and anyone else to answer the question, because if you just ask them, are the letters small or the letters big, it's kind of hard to, because you don't have, it's not easy for access, especially when you're dyslexic or such. So you check the word cat, establish the baseline. This is why you establish the baseline. So the word is supposed to be where it's supposed to be, and it looks the way it's supposed to look. Black letters don't usually have white background. Sometimes some people don't have a background with any color. You just have the word, right? This is why you run the checklist. You adjust it so they can have the word, right? Now sometimes, and I can't predict every situation will happen with your kid. Sometimes they're not able to do it directly. You can then, use overlaps. Like, I can't see the word, they say, and I'll go like, well, technically you're going to construct the word. But you know, you play video games, you use a screen of some kind, a monitor, a TV, and they go, yeah, can you know how that looks? And they go, yeah, put the word in the screen. They know how to do that, and they go, yeah, okay. Now, what color are the letters? The white. What's the background? Oh, it's black. All right, can you make the letters black and the background white? Yeah, and they're not used to do that, by the way. And you can then check it. Does that make it easy for you if the letters are black in the word and the background's white, or do you prefer to have white, you know, white letters with a black background? You can actually ask them questions like that, ask them to compare and test which one is easier for them. That's how kids works, you know. They can, you know, and that's the purpose of, you know, running the checklist, to adjust the word so it looks and the letters are manageable. Imagine the letters are 2 meters tall. I had, you know, as I had a kid, people do, kids are wonderful and that. So if I ask them, so how do you spell motorbike? And the first thing they do this, boom, because the letters are 2 meters tall. They go M-O-T-O-R-B-E-R-T-A. And they turn their heads all like that. And I said, isn't that hard to, you know, read it like that? And they go, yeah, I have to turn my head a lot. Why don't you make the letters smaller? And they may struggle at first, right? You have to remember that. This is the first time they're adjusting things on their own. But the good thing as a parent, you know, you have access to your kids. So when you're working with them for 1 day, 5, 10, 15 minutes, you know, check the word cat and all that stuff and adjust it. So you don't need to start the next word. You just need to, you know, establish the word. And the next day you can check that everything, you know, stays the same. Or then it's easy for them to, you know, adjust the word, letters, colors, or something like that. Because the most of the learning of this is, you know, between sessions. The reason why is because neural pathway has to be built in the brain. The brain basically makes offshoots of nerve endings and such. Very cool stuff, but it takes time to build. So that's that. Other than that, it's just about the feedback. Because when I was working with kids, I just said, I had a few papers of different words. Usually one they couldn't do. Okay, spell it. I didn't say what it was. Spell it. All right, spell it forward. Was it correct or not? It was. And I give them feedback. Yeah, it was. Backward. Spell it again. And after a while, they get pretty tired of you know, telling them to spell cat and verify it and all this stuff. Because, you know, at some point, your kid will go, I can do that. Yeah, but can you do this word? And they pick up the next word and they go, no. And the purpose here is to do it the same way you did the first word. The reason why we did the first word is to ensure everything works as it's supposed to. With the encoding, retrieval of the word, verification of the words was spelled correctly and such, is a process, internal process, a skill, a memory built. Once you can have that, you introduce the new word, and you do it the same way. You recognize this, yeah, memorize it, and then, you know, the new word, put it down, also to spell it out loud. Sometimes they get it right, but it will take more time, right? When you start spelling, you know, W-I-T-C-H. Now they have to verify what you just said. How are they going to do that? If there's something wrong with the encoding of the word, which it usually is, because they are dyslexic, they can't verify it properly usually. Because they have to, once you ask them, was that spelled correct or not? Now they have to go inside their own head, verify that the word is matching what they just said. And they may struggle with that. But you give them feedback now, and you tell them, no, yes, they may say, here's a contradictory, yes, you understand it. They may spell it correctly, but they think they didn't. No, I don't think that was correct. And you say that was correct. And you just show them the word again. You don't need to say anything at that point, if that's the case. Otherwise, they spelled it wrong, and you say, and they may think they spelled it correctly, and you say, no, that was not right. And you show them the word again. Do you know what you missed? And they may look at you and go, and this, you know, and go, oh, I think I forgot the H. And you say, that's correct. So memorize it again, run the process. Run the process with the new word until it works as well as the old, the baseline word, cat. And you just pick a word that they have usually a trouble with, depending on your language. It doesn't matter if this is English or Swedish or, Spanish or Mandarin or, I guess, Australian English. It's different, Put the shrimp on the, they speak very funny in some way. Actually, I don't understand. I was listening to some Australians talking, and it's really sometimes really, really hard because the way they speak the letters in the English, and such, makes it hard sometimes to translate it. Same thing with English. But it works in any language the same way. How it sounds and how it's been spelled is different. Reading, most people may believe that reading is a sub-vocalization. You read, the cat was chasing the dog into a corner, right? And you sub-vocalize that. No, really, really fast readers, they don't sub-vocalize. They just go. They just read it. There is no sub-vocalization. People who are really good at, back in the day, nowadays they have word processors doing the job for us. In the newspaper, they had to check for spelling, all that stuff, because they were, writing article on, maybe a typewriter even at the time. And they can just look at the text and the word would just pop up for them that they were not spelled correctly. They were that strong. And when they did that, they felt, that's not spelled correctly. It's not supposed to be spelled like that. Kind of weird, some people. But that's a skill people develop, proofreading skills. It makes it much easier to spell it. That's not how it's supposed to be spelled. So I think a word processor, well, they are a help. It could also, it doesn't teach you. You're typing out, you're writing words, and they're all misspelled. But if you don't have a way to fix those words for yourself, you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. Usually that's what happens with dyslexic, right? It doesn't help them that the word processor spit out a lot of words that's not spelled correctly. You need to, So what happens here is that once you run 3 to 5 words, that's usually enough for most kids. Once you can do cat, the new word, the new word, the new word, and the next word, up to 5 words or something like that. It could be more sometimes, it could be less. People are different. And when they can do that, something happens with the brain. The brain works like that once they know how to encode and retrieve and verify a word, boom, something happens. They start doing it with other words by themselves. They look at the word, it's not spelled correctly, because the word processor spit out something, and you go, okay, and you adjust it, and next time you write it the way it's supposed to. Did you know that everybody in every country in the world do it like that? If you have a reading difficulty, and you know who you are, or dyslexic, and you know who you are, you don't do that. Because you're reading, and your brain goes, you get stuck. And you have to read it again, and you go, because you can't fix it. That's why you're dyslexic. Once you run this process, if you have a parent do it for you, with you, or a friend do it with you, some adult, this will give you the feedback you need to be able to read as a dyslexic. Once you can do that, you're not dyslexic anymore. Like magic. Except it's not a magic, it's a skill that everybody who can read and spell in any country in the world, in any language, do. The thing they don't do in the field of dyslexia is they don't understand how you actually read. They can't teach you this. People don't understand how the brain works in the practical matter in this case. So when I was working with kids, I had them doing things depending on the kind of form of dyslexia. One of my favorites is a nearby town a few years back. I was working with a brother and his sister, and he was 15 at the time. He was tall, so he was playing basketball, and he was absolutely hopelessly couldn't do tests in school. His grades was awful. He was a dyslexic and all that stuff. So I was working with him the first session, and his sister, and I came back for a follow-up. That's what I do. You have to check your work. And he told me this, that he said, how are things working? He said, I ace everything. Everything? Oh yeah, I just fucking aced everything. Every test in the school, after you were here first time, I just could do it. And then my classmate and the teacher asked me how I cheated. True story. And I looked at him, what? Didn't you tell him I was there to help you overcome all this? Yeah, that didn't work. He just thought I cheated. He aced everything. So he didn't need more. He was done. His sister needed a little bit more help, so I did that. And that was fine. And I know how that sounds, right? You do one session and they're not dyslexic, because there's two types of dyslexics. One, they have everything they need, but it's not organized. You're doing this method and process, you fix that. And you get very, very fast results, right? This girl I work with had a word behind her, and I told her to put it forward, and I checked a lot of things, the way I've been talking about here. She was not dyslexic anymore, just like that. And it took 5 minutes. And for someone who is in the field of dyslexia, that sounds like magic, right? Or that can't be true. And, yeah, it is. But her mother, gave me some feedback, after a week or something like that. The teacher in the gymnastics asked, the mother, what have you done with your daughter? And she was like, what do you mean? Well, I was giving her an instruction in the class and she could do it. Yeah. Well, she hasn't been able to before. So what did you do? Well, I heard her talking to a guy about her dyslexia, which is now apparently gone, and apparently it fixed, to understand, how you're supposed to do that. Because a dyslexic, they understand what you're saying, but they sometimes may not be able to translate that into behavior, depending on, what has happened for them, to be the way they have been as far. And reading is a memory skill, right? Everything you do is a skill, because once you learn something, you can just do it. Like riding a bike, right? Most people don't know how to learn to ride a bike or walk or learn to talk. Just talking alone requires you to control around 100 muscles in your breathing, and speaking is vocal cord with a lot of muscles. And in my example, I had a surgery when I was a teenager that destroyed nerve endings to one of my vocal cords. So one of my vocal cords doesn't move. The other one just moves like this. And I had to learn to control my voice a little bit better over time, so I can speak even though just with one vocal cord. So yeah. So it's a skill. And once you teach your kid to spell one word like cat, have that as a baseline, then run the checklist, introduce a new word. They're going to struggle at first because you're going to pick a word that they can't do so well. And once you clean that up, they can do a cat and a new word as well. It's already the third word. And the process just gets faster and faster for them. How long it will take you to get there, I don't know. But the advantage you have with your kid is you can do it 5-10 minutes every day, because you don't need it. When I was working, I had to do an hour or two or something like that, because I got hired to do work like that. But when I came back, that's when you can see what has happened between the first session and second session. And usually it was an hour one session, because I'm highly skilled in this area. You don't need to be skilled, you just need to pay attention. They spell the word, you ask them when they have spelled it out loud, was it correct or not? They go internal, retrieve the word, they just spell out loud. Now they have to check versus the word they have memorized. And if that word is not encoded properly, they will tell you, yeah, and you look at them, no, it was not. The encoding and the memorization of the word is not correct. That's what you have to fix there. And you just run this over and over again until it ends. Because all you need to do is check the word again. Do you know what went wrong or not? And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And you tell them, well, you missed the H, or you missed the W, or something like that, or missed the I, or whatever, or missed the E. And then you just go, so memorize it again. You done? Okay. Spell it out loud. C-E-T, T-C. Was it correct or not? Yes or no? You just clean it up so you get it right every time. It's very simple. You don't need to tell them how to do it, because you can't. They understand what you want them to do, but they can't do it, right? because they can see the word. This is the issue they have. They can see the word out there in the world if you know, doing like this, right? Oh yeah, I can see that. But when you put it away, now they have to use the memory of the word that has been encoded. And if that's not properly done, you have to fix that. That's what you do with the feedback. Feedback, question, repeat, question, repeat, question, repeat. Run the checklist, verify that the word stays the same, looks the same, they're clear to see, letters stuck together in the word. As I said, you know, my sister's husband, you know, he was reading very slowly, right? And when I asked him what he meant by slow, he said one letter at a time. And why he was doing that was because some teacher, when he was a kid in school, told him to do it that way. And he never figured to do it in any other way until I, you know, asked him, and I said, "Ooh, that's too slow." And I told him, you know, specifically, look at the whole word at the same one time, right? And he was like, okay, because he can already do that. He just didn't know how to connect it to, you know, the reading capability. And I said, yeah. And then you take and then you do that to the whole sentence, and his brain basically just, and he could read and understand. It was all there. It was just, you know, limited by an instruction he had learned so many years ago in school. It's amazing, you know. And when you work with a kid, you know, be patient. You know, you don't need to rush things. You just do this for 5-10 minutes every day. And at some point, your kid will just go, you know, picking up the skill. And they can just, you know, improve on themselves. This is what people do when they learn to read. The reading, and when they, instead of getting stuck, they see a word that's spelled in the book differently, and then they adjust, oh, that's how it's supposed to look. And they adjust it in their own encoding, and then keep on reading, or writing, or whatever they do. You know, I'm Swedish, right? So I have to learn to speak English, kind of, they say, and write English, kind of, they say. People in English are very weird with that stuff. Well, you're not writing the proper grammar specifically to, or what? Do you understand what I'm writing and saying? And people go, yeah, that's not good enough. That's how communication is supposed to work. Yeah, but you don't do it the proper way. And I'm like, who gives a fuck about that? I mean, seriously. There's no humor in that country, so I guess. Anyway, it's supposed to be that way. It can't be any other way. When people are stuck, there are no windows. Anyway, so if you're a parent, be patient, do 5-10 minutes. Remember that the most time is between sessions. That's when the neural pathways are growing, all that stuff, and they can pick up the the learning process between sessions much easier. You don't need to work 2 hours or 1 hour. You just work efficiently 5-10 minutes. Once you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 words, things will take off. Now, if your kid is, in the other example here, doesn't have the skill and not organized, it's not about organization might be an issue also, but they may not have the skill properly. They may have a trouble with where the word is, and keeping it stable or something like that, right? And you can use a visual overlap with a monitor or TV, put it on the TV screen you have in your head, and go, okay. And so I can't cover every eventuality. You just have to be patient, and do this over and over again. Run the checklist and check after a day or two that the word are, the way they are supposed to be, and if they can do that or not. Sometimes you have to be flexible around this stuff, because sometimes people have a neurological issue, right? One of their centers of coloring might not be working optimal. They can't do black letters on white background. They might do red letters on a white background. But that means they don't need to be falling, to be, and they start to read faster, and they start to be able to read the way they're supposed to do. So, no, don't be too, oh, it has to be exactly like this, right? No, it doesn't. You just need to work for your kid, which is the point here, right? And if you're dyslexic and you're watching this, you know what I'm speaking of. Yeah, that guy, he's talking about all this stuff that, and kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You're not seeing things, you're actually constructing things. And if your encoding of the word and the retrieval and the verification of the word is interrupted in some way, you just get stuck. And you have to have help from the proper feedback from your parents or some adults or something like that. They can help you run this back and forth until you clean up, establish the baseline, run the checklist, run the new word, and repeat until things start to happen, and they will happen. The way the brain works is this is the way the brain works, and this is how people in every country in the world actually read. That's the skill set, and that's how you learn it. Good luck. Have fun.